Have you ever felt like you were standing in front of something too big, too strong, too overwhelming? A battle you never asked for but one you can't walk away from? Life often places us in front of our own Goliaths, challenges that seem impossible to overcome. But what if victory doesn't come from size, strength, or even skill? What if the key to winning our battles is something far greater? The following Bible story is one of courage, faith, and trusting God when everything seems stacked against us. Stay with us as we dive into the legendary clash between David and Goliath, a battle that was won before it even began. The sun beat down on the valley of Elah, its golden rays shimmering over the iron and bronze of thousands of soldiers. Dust swirled beneath the marching feet of warriors, their armor clanking like distant thunder. On one side of the valley the Israelites stood, silent, tense, their hands gripping their weapons. On the other side, a force loomed like a storm on the horizon. The Philistines had come for war, and with them, a giant, Goliath of Gath, a name spoken in fear. A man whose very presence crushed hope before a single blow was struck. He towered over the battlefield, his massive form wrapped in armor so heavy that few men could even lift it. His helmet gleamed like the sun, his bronze greaves clanked with each step, and in his massive hands, he held a spear so large its tip alone weighed more than a soldier's sword. But he did not stand alone. Before him walked his shield-bearer, a warrior trained to clear the way for the unstoppable. And then the voice. "Why do you even bother lining up for battle?" Goliath's taunt rang across the valley like the roar of a beast. His laughter echoed against the hills, mocking, cruel. "I am a Philistine. You are mere servants of Saul. Choose a man to fight me. If he kills me, we will be your slaves. But if I kill him..." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You will bow to us. You will serve us. This day I defy the armies of Israel. Who will stand against me?" Silence. A deep, suffocating silence. Saul, the king of Israel, once mighty in battle, felt the weight of fear press down on his chest. The soldiers who had once followed him into victory now lowered their eyes. No one spoke. No one moved. Goliath had not swung his sword, had not drawn a single drop of blood. And yet he had already won. For 40 days, the valley had echoed with the same challenge, the same mockery. Every morning and every evening, Goliath stepped forward, his voice shaking the hills, his words stripping the courage from Israel's warriors. And for 40 days no one answered. The once mighty army of Saul had become a motionless sea of fear. But far from the battlefield, in a place of rolling hills and golden fields, a different story unfolded. Bethlehem, a quiet town where sheep wandered over the slopes and the wind carried the scent of fresh bread. Here a boy tended his father's flock, a shepherd unknown to the world, yet known by God. David, the youngest son of Jesse. While his older brothers marched off to war, he remained behind, watching over the sheep, moving between the pastures and the king's court, unnoticed, unimportant in the eyes of men. But God was writing a story no one could see. One morning, Jesse, an aging father with deep lines of wisdom on his face, called for his youngest son. "David," he said, handing him a sack of roasted grain and 10 loaves of bread. "Take these to your brothers in the camp. And these." He placed 10 cheeses in David's hands. "For their commander. Go quickly. See how your brothers are and bring back word." David obeyed. He did not know that this simple task, this routine act of service, would place him at the center of history. He did not know that while Israel's warriors stood frozen in fear, he was about to step onto the battlefield of destiny. He only knew that his father had sent him. And that was enough. The sun had barely risen when David set out, leaving his flock in the care of another. The fields behind him were quiet, but ahead, the valley was alive with the sounds of war. Metal clashed against metal as soldiers sharpened their blades. The scent of dust and sweat thickened the air. David moved quickly, his steps light, his heart steady. He was only a messenger, a shepherd delivering bread and news. He had no place among warriors, at least that's what the world believed. As he reached the camp, the army of Israel surged forward, taking their positions. They shouted their war cry, a sound meant to stir courage, to remind them of victories past. Yet, beneath the noise, fear still clung to them like a shadow. The Philistine army stood on the opposite hill, a dark mass of defiance. Between them, the valley stretched like a great wound in the earth, the space where courage and fear would collide. David left his supplies with the keeper and hurried to find his brothers. He was speaking with them when a familiar sound thundered across the battlefield, the voice of a giant, Goliath. Once again he stepped forward, armored in bronze, his words cutting through the morning air like a blade. He mocked, he taunted, he called out for a challenger. But there was no answer. Not one man in Israel dared to move. Instead, David watched as grown men, seasoned warriors, battle-worn and strong, stepped back, their eyes filled with dread. The whispers began before the echoes of Goliath's challenge had faded. Soldiers spoke in hushed voices, pointing at the giant as if he were an unstoppable force. "Do you see him?" they muttered. "Every day he comes to mock us. The king has promised great wealth to the man who defeats him. He will even give him his daughter in marriage. His family will be freed from taxes forever." They spoke of the reward, but none dared to reach for it. Fear had built its throne in their hearts, and Goliath ruled over them without ever lifting his sword. David listened, but his mind was on something greater. He turned to the men around him, his voice sharp, cutting through their fearful murmurs. "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel?" His words were not those of a curious boy, but of a man who saw something they could not. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine," he demanded, "that he should defy the armies of the living God?" The men looked at him startled. To them, Goliath was an unshakable force, a warrior no man could defeat. But David saw something different. He saw a mortal man standing against an immortal God. He saw arrogance where others saw strength. He saw an enemy not just of Israel but of the Lord himself. And for the first time in 40 days someone in the camp was not afraid. The soldiers repeated their words, their voices laced with both desperation and curiosity. "This is what will be done for the man who kills him," they told David. The promise of wealth, the king's own daughter, freedom from taxes. It was enough to stir any man's ambition. Yet David's heart was moved by something greater. He was not thinking of rewards or titles. He was thinking of the name of his God being mocked, of an entire nation cowering before a man of flesh and bone. But before David could press further, a familiar voice cut through the crowd, sharp, bitter, laced with anger. His eldest brother, a man who had seen battles, who had the look of a warrior, yet whose heart now burned with something other than courage. "Why have you come down here?" Eliab's words struck like a whip, his eyes filled with resentment. "And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" The insult was clear. David was nothing more than a shepherd boy, insignificant, unworthy of standing among warriors. But Eliab's anger did not end there. "I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." A stinging accusation, but an empty one. It was not David who stood idly by, unwilling to act. It was not David who was afraid to face Goliath. Yet here was his brother, his own flesh and blood, attacking him, dismissing him. Jealousy, insecurity, perhaps Eliab saw in David the courage he himself had lost. David turned to him, his voice firm but restrained. "Now what have I done?" He met his brother's glare, unshaken. "Can't I even speak?" There was no argument, no attempt to defend himself. There was no time for such things. He turned away and asked another soldier the same question. Again the men repeated what they had said before. Whispers spread through the camp. The boldness of this young shepherd, the fire in his words, these things did not go unnoticed. And soon word of David reached the ears of Saul. The king, weighed down by fear, by uncertainty, by the heavy burden of a battle he was too afraid to fight, sent for the boy who spoke without fear. David stood before Saul, a king who had once been chosen by God, a man who had seen victories but now cowered in the face of the enemy. Yet David did not speak with hesitation. His voice carried certainty, conviction. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," he declared. "Your servant will go and fight him." A statement so simple yet so impossible. A boy against a giant. A shepherd against a warrior. The room must have fallen silent at the absurdity of it. Then came Saul's response, laced with doubt, with reason. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him," the king said. "You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." The weight of experience, the logic of the battlefield, it all stood against David. But faith does not bend to logic. Courage is not measured by years. David did not back down. He met the king's doubts with a testimony of God's faithfulness. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," he said. The words of a shepherd, but what followed was not the tale of a quiet, simple life. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it and killed it." The room must have stirred at those words. A boy who had faced lions, who had battled bears. But David was not boasting of his own strength. "Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear," he continued. this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. And then came the final, unshakable declaration. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. David was not trusting in his own skill. He was trusting in the God who had never failed him. Perhaps something in Saul stirred at those words. Perhaps, for a moment, he remembered what it was like to trust in the Lord. Whatever the reason, he looked at David, this young man who carried the faith of an entire nation upon his shoulders, and he spoke the words that would seal the moment, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Yet even in that decision, Saul could not fully understand. He still thought in the ways of men, in the ways of war. He dressed David in his own tunic, placed a coat of armor upon him, a bronze helmet upon his head. It was the attire of a warrior, the armor of a king. But David was not meant to fight as a soldier. His strength did not come from metal and iron. He fastened the sword over the tunic, took a few steps, and felt the weight of it all. It was not his battle to fight like this. It was never about the armor, the weapons, the things men placed their trust in. David would face the giant as he was, armed not with steel but with faith. David adjusted the armor one last time, shifting his weight, testing its feel. It was heavy, unfamiliar, restricting. This wasn't him. This wasn't how he fought. He turned to Saul, shaking his head. "I can't do this," he said. "I'm not used to it." There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just a quiet certainty. He stripped off the armor, letting it fall to the ground with a dull clank. If he was going to face Goliath, he would do it his way. Not as a soldier, not as a king, as a shepherd. He took his staff, the same one that had guided him through the wilderness. Then he knelt by a stream, his fingers moving over the stones, searching. Smooth, small, perfect for the sling. He slipped them into the pouch on his belt, wrapped his fingers around the worn leather of his sling, and rose to his feet. Then, without another word, he walked toward the battlefield. Across the valley, Goliath moved forward, his shield-bearer pacing ahead of him. His massive frame cast a long shadow in the afternoon sun. He had done this for 40 days now, stepped forward, challenged, mocked, waited for an answer that never came. Until now. His eyes narrowed as he caught sight of the figure approaching. Small, young. No armor. No sword. Just a stick in one hand and a sling in the other. A laugh rumbled deep in his chest, then burst out, full of scorn. "What is this?" he said, shaking his head. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" His voice carried across the valley, dripping with contempt. He spat on the ground and muttered curses, calling upon his gods to strike David down. Then he pointed a thick, calloused finger at the boy. "Come here," he said, grinning. "I'll feed your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He simply met the giant's gaze, steady and unwavering. His voice was clear, cutting through the air like a blade. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin," he called out, his tone calm but strong. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, the one you've been mocking." He took a step closer, his confidence unshaken. "Today the Lord will hand you over to me. I'll strike you down. I'll cut off your head. And today the whole Philistine army will fall. Their bodies will be food for the birds and wild animals. And you know what?" He gestured toward the ranks of both armies. "Everyone watching will know something. It's not swords or spears that save people. The battle belongs to the Lord, and he's already decided who wins." For the first time, Goliath hesitated. Just for a second. Then his rage boiled over. Enough of this. Enough words. Enough games. He let out a roar and charged forward, his massive legs kicking up dirt, his armor clanking with every step. He was done talking. He was ready to end this pathetic challenge. And that was when David moved. He didn't wait. Didn't step back. He ran, straight toward the giant. His hand dipped into his pouch, fingers closing around a stone. Smooth, perfect. He pulled it out, placed it in the sling and began to spin it. Faster. Faster. The sound of it cutting through the air was drowned out by the pounding of Goliath's feet. The moment stretched, hanging between them like the space between lightning and thunder. And then David let go. The stone flew like an arrow, swift and precise. It sliced through the air, past the shield bearer, past the heavy armor, straight toward its mark. The impact was brutal, sudden. The sound of stone meeting flesh and bone echoed across the valley. Goliath's head snapped back. His massive body tensed, then gave way. The earth seemed to tremble as he collapsed, face first, in the dust. Silence. The kind that stretches too long, too thick, as if the world itself is struggling to understand what just happened. One moment there was a giant. The next, there was only a broken heap on the ground. David stood over him, the sling still in his hand, his chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. No sword, no armor, just a shepherd with a stone and a purpose. The Philistine champion was dead. And with him, the fear that had gripped Israel for 40 days. David stepped forward, his heart still steady, his grip firm. The dust swirled around him as he stood over Goliath's fallen body. For a moment, there was no movement, just the weight of the moment pressing down on the battlefield like an unseen force. Then, without hesitation, David reached down and wrapped his fingers around the hilt of Goliath's own sword. It was massive, nearly too heavy for him, but he lifted it with purpose. The blade caught the light as he raised it high. And then, with a single decisive stroke, he brought it down. The steel bit through flesh and bone, severing the giant's head in one brutal motion. Blood darkened the earth beneath him. And just like that, the terror of Israel was no more. For a heartbeat, silence. A silence so complete it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. And then chaos. The Philistines watched in horror as their champion's severed head was lifted high, his lifeless body sprawled in the dirt. Their great warrior, their unbreakable titan, was nothing more than a corpse. Panic spread like fire through their ranks. One by one, then all at once they turned, dropped their weapons, ran. Fear, the same fear they had inflicted upon Israel, now gripped them. And the moment the Israelites saw it, the moment they knew, truly knew, the enemy was broken, a cry erupted from their throats. A cry of victory. A cry of vengeance. A cry that shook the valley. And with that, the army of Israel surged forward, weapons raised, feet pounding the earth as they chased the Philistines down. The battle became a hunt. The Philistines fled, their desperation carving a path of death behind them. Through the valley, past the entrance of Gath, all the way to the gates of Ekron, the Israelites pursued them, cutting them down as they ran. Their bodies littered the road, staining the ground with the remnants of their once great army. The tables had turned. The oppressors had become the prey. And by the time the dust settled, Israel stood victorious. Their enemy routed, their fears vanquished. When they returned, they took what was left, the spoils of war, the remnants of a shattered army. The camp of the Philistines, once a place of power, now belonged to Israel. And David stood apart from it all. He had no need for plunder, no hunger for gold or armor. He had claimed the only trophy that mattered. Goliath's head, a grotesque and undeniable testament to what had happened this day. He carried it with him as he walked, his steps steady, unwavering. The young shepherd who had arrived that morning was not the same man who left the battlefield. He did not need to speak. The truth was written in the blood on his hands, in the severed head he held, in the silence of those who once doubted him. He did not fight for riches. He did not fight for glory. He fought because someone had to. As he reached Jerusalem, the people gathered, eyes wide with awe, whispers filling the streets. They had heard. They had seen. The boy who stood against the giant had won. And he had brought proof. But David's mind was elsewhere. He had not forgotten the weapons, the very ones Goliath had once used to strike fear into Israel. He took them and placed them in his own tent. A reminder, not of the giant's strength, but of his defeat. A testament that no man, no warrior, no champion was greater than the God who had delivered him. Back at the battlefield, Saul watched, his eyes never leaving David as he walked away. There was something about this boy, something different. Abner, Saul called, turning to his commander. Whose son is that young man? His voice was measured, but there was an urgency beneath it. A need to understand who this shepherd-turned-warrior truly was. Abner hesitated. He had seen many soldiers rise and fall, but never had he witnessed anything like this. As surely as you live, your majesty, Abner said slowly, I don't know. The answer was not enough. Saul's gaze remained fixed on the figure of David, now disappearing from sight. Find out, he ordered. Find out who he is. And when David returned, his hands still stained with battle, the head of Goliath still in his grasp, he was brought before the king. Saul studied him, searching for something, an explanation, a reason, anything that made sense of what had just transpired. Whose son are you, young man? The king asked at last. David met his gaze without hesitation, his voice steady, certain. I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. And though neither of them could have known it, the world had just shifted. The course of Israel's future had been rewritten. For David had stepped out of the fields and into destiny. And nothing would ever be the same. Goliath was powerful, armed with weapons, experience, and overwhelming strength. Yet he fell with a single stone. What? Because the battle was never really about size or power, it was about faith. David's victory wasn't in his sling, but in his trust in God. How often do we focus on the size of our problems instead of the size of our God? When life presents impossible obstacles, do we hesitate or do we step forward with faith like David? David didn't rely on someone else's armor. He didn't fight the way the world expected him to. How many times do we try to face our struggles with the wrong weapons? Our own strength, our own plans, our own understanding. But David knew that true victory doesn't come from human ability, but from God's power. Are we fighting our battles in faith, or are we weighed down by the world's expectations? And then there's fear. The entire army of Israel trembled before Goliath. They saw only defeat before the fight even began. How many of us allow fear to paralyze us before we even try? Fear tells us we're too small, too weak, too unprepared. But faith says the battle belongs to the Lord. When we trust in Him, even giants fall. So, which voice are we listening to? Fear or faith? David didn't just believe, he acted. He ran toward the battle, knowing God was with him. Faith is not just about believing, it's about stepping forward even when the odds seem impossible. What battle is God calling us to face today? And are we willing to move forward, trusting that He is already making the way? If this message encouraged you, don't forget to subscribe to Bible Animations, turn on notifications so you never miss a new video, and leave a like if you enjoyed this animation. More powerful Bible stories are coming your way. Stay strong in faith and see you in the next video.